It is that the three pillars, three main forms of education, formal, informal, and the one which is degree oriented versus what goes from the word of mouth. We all remember our first teacher in our lives is our mother. So it's very important for each one of us to get that right. And that is where I personally feel primary education is very, very essential. Let's also go back to what we remember, what we were taught in school. Maybe that time it was more of mugging, but today when we face the real life problems, we actually look into what was taught in the school and how important those words were. In fact, Kaushik just touched upon the pollution levels in Delhi. It's a gas chamber. You cannot even imagine what we Delhiites are facing today. And we all, in a way, you talk to a small child who is 2-year-old, will also talk about there is too much of pollution. Schools are closed. Many offices, they have given work from home. Now, is this the kind of environment we want to live in? The answer to that is no. Now, and if we have spoken about this subject 10 years back, perhaps it would have been, nothing is going to happen. Climate change, it's not going to have any impact on us. The only reality of life is change, and therefore some change has to occur. So it's only now that we are facing this particular problem that we are talking of, that we have to relook at this problem. Now, education, and especially in today's era, or today's date, it's very different from what you and I have gone through. For us, it was education only in the school. And then it depends a lot on the teacher who was teaching us. You develop interest in the subject which you were taught by the best of the teacher, perhaps. But today, it is that you have this internet available, and people, once they develop a bit of interest, they start looking or try to get more and more information. So, and then it is also that not that whatever is being done in our country in the small geographical zone, it is that the entire universe. There are examples. Like today morning, what they have spoken about the use of rice straw. And the entire that you have 1.5 million into 2 kg bags of mushroom being prepared on the rice straw waste. So why can't we also start thinking on it? And all that can perhaps happen once we try to look into the problem, we analyze the problem, we try to find out solutions. And I'm very happy to introduce this particular panel. We have experts who are from the preschool education. So Vasasvi is with us, who is concentrating on preschool education. Tamara, she has a lot of experience in various stages of education. Ravleen, of course, she is associated with higher learning. And as I said, it is across the borders. So she is associated with one of the leading universities of Australia, Deakin University. So the experiences which are being done in Australia, that's bringing them to India, or rather also having their students to work on Indian problems. So that is quite interesting. And last but not the least, it's Rishi Raj. And he is also, again, associated with education. The way you can communicate, the point which was also raised by Kaushik, you have to make it interesting. And so therefore he's with the school. That reminds me of Three Idiots. Like, it's not the engineering that you learn with mugging, it is that what is required for the region. So I'm very glad the way Rishi is involved with all that teaching. So it's very interesting, and we'll listen more from him. I see a lot of potential because we are talking of India, where 30% of the population is in the age group of 0 to 14 years. We are also finding today that there are young environmentalist activists, you can call them, but I'll say that not really activist in negative sense, but they are making others being aware. And that Swedish girl who is born in 2003, so she has rocked the world, and she's not the only one. There are many more who are talking of these problems. So, so I'll stop here, and I'll perhaps start with you, because I'm changing the sequence because we'll go from preschool to the university level education with permission of all of you. Okay, I'd like to ask you on your experiences and what do you see as the potential of teaching, or what kind of teaching should be done at the preschool level?
Yes, thank you so much, and a very good afternoon to each and everyone present here. At preschool, we start from the age group of 2 years, and children start stepping into the school from that age as a result, and that's the most influential period of a child's life. And what we learn during those years, say from 2 to 6 years or 7 years, are the things that stay in our mind. So that is a very crucial time where we can actually get them into the sustainable education system with sensibility, you know, the responsibility that is there. So in our preschools, I would just give an example. We have been having these campaigns which are called, which we call them called Earth Kids. And we have been having, you know, every year Earth Kid 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And during these campaigns, we actually get the children involved in different activities related to nature, get them into gardening, ask them to, you know, have pot plants and stuff, and also teach them sustainable habits like conservation of electricity, not using plastic bags, and those kind of, so on and so forth. So these activities, by these activities we have seen that now the young ones, they are kind of influencing their parents. They would tell their parents that why is this light on? And it's actually a very, I mean, it's a matter of, you know, pride that the parents would come and say that, oh, our children are telling us that we should conserve petrol, or we should, you know, act in those responsible manners. So I think it's the best time to inculcate these habits of, I would say, the green quotient. We have this IQ, EQ. We should have a GQ, which is the green quotient, and it's very important to imbibe it at the early years. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I totally agree with you. Being a grandmother of 2 children, 5 and 7, how much do they learn from the school? And for them, their teacher is like God. So whatever teacher had said is the last word. So thanks for contributing that aspect to the society. I'll next come to Tamara. Tamara, of course, she had wide experience in environmental teaching at various levels. So let her share her experiences.
Thanks, Vibha, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to very quickly give you a background so you understand where I'm coming from when I say what I say. So I've been in this field for the last 2 decades, and I've seen various aspects of the space. I've been involved both in policy as well as in things like ISO 14001, so environmental management systems. I've been with clean energy, and in later years with organic agriculture and farmers' welfare. So I've actually seen quite a breadth of the space. And each time I had the privilege or limitation, whatever you might call it, of being able to identify gaps. And honestly, the biggest gap that I saw was communication. And I'm glad Kaushik brought it up. I'm glad Sunena spoke about it in her session earlier. But this is a cross-disciplinary field. We cannot get away from that. And unfortunately, the way the education system is today, it's only when you reach the master's level or when you've reached a certain stage in your career that people start talking cross-disciplinary. I would really like to see that the whole syllabus is defined and redefined to talk about environment in economics, talk about environment in our value systems. So I think today we are coming up with a whole bunch of new values, right? We're talking about things like climate justice. Does anyone know what that means? Does anyone have any idea? So climate justice is not just about managing the effects of climate change. We're not talking mitigation, adaptation. We're talking about the ethical and the social things that come with it. For example, who owns the forests? We're talking about food security. We're talking about agro-biodiversity as opposed to just biodiversity. So these are very important things. There's a whole language being developed, and I think our education system is just not keeping up. I mean, kids are keeping up to some extent, but I think if we can start from very early inculcating a different value system as we move forward, apart from truth and honesty and all those things we hold dear to us and love, I think we can move forward with something else, these new sustainable values, I'd like to call them. And then I think that married with our technical expertise or our professions and definitely communication skills, then we'll be in a much better position for people to start talking to each other. So I think, Vibha, that's really my key, that we start really young. I'm glad she's doing what she's doing. But, you know, that we start really young with this.
Yeah, Tamara, that is, we are talking of the formal education. So what role do you see for informal education as well? Because when we are talking of grassroots, now those kids will take long time and they may not even come to the schools.
Sure.
So therefore, how is it that we should reach the grassroots? And
so there's quite a big focus right now on traditional value systems, traditional skills, and traditional knowledge. And in our field in particular, there's no one size fits all. Someone said this earlier in the morning, and I completely agree. Everything, all the issues we are dealing with are very local in their depth and breadth. And unless we actually go to each place and figure what it is that each one needs, we're not going to really be able to, we can't be prescriptive. We can't say, I come from so-and-so university and this is what I did in that university, and therefore now I'm coming to a little village in Arunachal and this is going to work. So we really need to start understanding traditional knowledge, skills, traditional culture, and how that has an impact on how they view their environment, what values they share with their environment, and then work upwards from that.
sure. In fact, I'll just like to add here, there was one program of Department of Biotechnology, they called it DNA Clubs, which wasn't, DNA is not the DNA as such. It was more on Department of Biotechnology's initiative on natural resource awareness. And we were associated with that program, and it was for the schools, and we actually chose the schools which were in the rural areas. And what was done was to give them a microscope, give them the basic structure, basic equipmentation to understand what biodiversity is. And we just had best of the environmentalists recording their lectures and then making it available to the school children. So it was conveyed to them at that stage, and then we chose environmental champions, and they were taken for 1 week awareness campaign. So that was quite an interesting program. Of course, because of lack of funds, we had to close that program, but it was quite interesting. So Rishi, I'll first come to you.
So basically all these years of like 13 years, a lot of mistakes I have done. So basically I want to point out those mistakes which will be helpful for others. You should not do those mistakes. Must be a lot of people are not doing those mistakes. I'm just, because I live on observations and I work in village in an island called Majuli for last 13 years. So this example I'm going to give you on education, which ma'am has already pointed out. What is the importance of an alternate education? What is it actually? And we normally, what the mistakes, what we figure it out. So I work in a little Sapori area, which is like when the river is very high, they create those sand dunes kind of areas, and it becomes where people stays there. It's known as Pathori Suk, which is technically it's Lakhimpur district, but people have a strong association with Majuli because it takes 30 minutes. But if he has to go to Lakhimpur, it'll take 3 hours for him to sail the boat, the hand boats actually. So every morning for last 1.5 years, I've been waiting there is not a bus stand actually, there is a boat stand, which children's wait. When the boats are there, they jump and they cross the river. So I've been observing for last 3 years now. Very high tides, they use their slippers to wave the boat so that the wave reaches the other side in a scientific way. So the science is there. So the children knows how to do that. So this is my observation for last 3 years. And when I first went, again, being from the city, born and brought up, can speak English. So when I went there, when I asked them, they challenged me, do you know to climb a tree? And I said, no, I don't know. So these are the things which kept me realizing what these children have. So whatever model we build up, we need to understand who they are first. Whatever be the model. So I started working for the senior people of the villages initially. Then the first question which comes to me, are you from an NGO? I said, no, sir. Oh, you get a lot of money, I know. You get from NGOs a lot of money and you don't work here. So I understood for 4 years I cannot work for the older people actually. Because there is a mistake which has been done and I'm also a part of it. So let's rework on something, what it can be. I don't know what it can be because I'm not a very high educated person or something. I have very limited bandwidth. Yes, art as a medium was well connected to me and to all the people here in Assam. We never talk about art as a part of education very strongly. Just a competition which we always name it. There is a competition, come over, 50,000 cash prize. But how we can connect it, that's more important. So last 2 years back, I did a little research with few of the children in Sapori areas, what they think about flood. They did some sketches. So again, going from the city and reading a lot of publications and all, I thought it's pathetic during flood, how they live, what they eat and all. They drew some pictures which pointed out they play games. They swim, they challenge the other guy. So all the pictures were like that. So we got the pure understanding about how he is so resilient to something which is known as the floods actually. He doesn't care about floods. He invited me, sir, you come over, we're going to enjoy the floods. So I've been observing floods for many years now. So I went to teach them, but I'm learning in return. So that's the potential of an alternate education which is there. The roots are very well connected in villages. We just need to go there and implement few of the things. If we create a model for them, like a city model, it'll never work. It'll never work. They are not there to score marks. They know the environment well, that's why they know to climb a tree. Even very interesting figures, which a lot of people might be knowing here. I always ask them, how you know floods are coming, you shift here and there, you shift the tractors, the kettles to the highlands, how you know? You don't know, sir, all the caterpillars going to go above the tree, you observe. He exactly knows within 10 days, 12 days, the flood's going to come in the village. So beautiful definitions which are there, but yes, archival work has not yet been done in a proper way. It's been accessible to all of the people and all, and we are not a very large organization which can just go into that actually. So every year we celebrate Children's Festival, different Sapori Onsols across Majuli. Most of the Sapori Onsols are towards Lokhimpur. So December 24th till 26th is the festival time where children come in. We don't invite any artisans from anywhere. A lot of university supports. Belfast University last year was the support system in terms of sending in a lot of students in there to work with us. So this year also there are a lot of people coming in. So this is a 3-day festival where children's going to show you what living is all about. So it becomes an art as a model, as a tool. Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting. In fact, that is what we all have to keep in mind, that let's not call our communities that they are uneducated. They are far more educated in their own rights, whatever is important to them. And I'll share with you another example. You might be aware that agar is from agar tree in Agartala. It draws its name from agar. And it's the tribal art, because it doesn't come from the tree, it comes from the infected tree. So how to infect the tree, that art is available with the local communities. And there was a huge project, and Government of India, they have spent a lot of money, that if we can develop a scientific way of affecting agar tree. And we failed. It was 5 years of 4 or 5 institutes working on it, microbiologists, pathologists, everyone worked on it, and we never succeeded. And this art is available with the locals. So therefore, there are many things which are available with the grassroots, and it's time that those are also translated to larger number of people. So thanks, Rishi. So I'll now come to Ravneet. So she's, as I said, she's associated with one of the universities in Australia, leading universities, Deakin University. And of course, she'll tell more about it, but my understanding is what they are trying to do is find a solution in which scientists from India as well as Australia are involved to the problems which are more endemic to India.
Thanks, Vibha, and good afternoon, everyone. Yes, that's true. I work for Deakin University, and Deakin University celebrates 25 years in India this year. So we were the first university to actually set up in India to work with India in India. To me, I think when I think about sustainability or I think about environment, the first thing that comes to my mind is, yes, what can we do with education? How can education play a role? And what comes to mind is, again, to think about the mindset. To me, education is all about changing and opening your mind. And if we are able to do that, whether it's at the grassroots level or at the policy level, we've done our bit. And Vibha talked about education as informal and formal. I'll go a step further and say that how about us as individuals starting to think about what are the 5 things that I can do and help my own neighborhood, my own society, and help in educating what are the do's and don'ts to have a sustainable environment. If we are able to create that ecosystem amongst ourselves, then I think the first tick on education we've achieved. When you talk about policy, UNESCO talked about the main thing is education must support sustainability. How do we do that? They talked about learning to know, that's the main aspect, learning to do, and learning to live together, and learning to be. Now, if you put this into a grassroots system, if we are able to take all of these back into the real work that is being done, how do we then enhance and sustain it with education to the next step? So when you talk about education and its role, to me it's about how do we change our mindset, how do we create awareness, and what do we do both in an informal and a formal setup. I think thinking about transformation, reshaping, recreating, and educating goes a long way in our societies. If we are not able to do that in a small way, we will not be able to do that as a nation. Look what's happening with the Amazons. I mean, the lungs of the world. See what's happening with the oil spill, 2,000 kilometers affected. How are we going to change this? Can we reverse this effect? I think these are the kind of things that we must think about. And then I also feel education plays a very big role when you think about the high-end research. What kind of research is going on in the world? Can we really come down to looking at research projects that can impact societies, that can come up with ideas and thoughts and creations that can help us in our day-to-day lives? That is the role of education in real time. And then use of technology, use of media. It was talked about how do we make sure that the media plays an effect. The single linking thread to the whole ecosystem is education. Because that actually it can be formal, it can be informal. We talked about what's happening in the village. Now, that's where also we bring out how that can then be formalized into learnings and then taken to the next generation. So it also has to think about how cultures play a role. It was talked about earlier that if you actually, if you create something which scares you of living, then you pay more attention to it. So how do we inculcate education and culture together to talk about a more sustainable world? I think that's another way to think about it. In the Northeast, of course, all of us understand Assam, your mountains and lakes are all sacred. How do we make sure that people understand what they can do with it and how do they have to protect it? How do we make planting of trees an integral part of education? How do we make school programs, which is not just about going and having a good time, but actually getting them to really understand how it makes a difference as an integral part of lifestyle? So it has to be in our lifestyle, talking about primary, talking about college education, school education, and then at the policy level, single focus to me is how do we all come together through education to make this a more sustainable world?
Thank you. In fact, that brings me to another point, and that is that this particular region of India, it's so rich in natural resources, it's so rich in biodiversity. And there are it has so much of potential for economic benefit as well. And it is, therefore, I feel that the students, right from all the students, they should appreciate that they can get economic returns from what they have inherited in this part of the world. And at the same time, it is to be conserved so that their future generations are also benefited from it. I'll come back to what was said by Kaushik, and that is that sometimes you have to you have to add spice to the news. Because otherwise, and long back once the media person, they said that, remember yourself, what is it you read? You read the newspaper, and if there isn't anything, then you say, kuch nahi hai aaj ki news mein. So you look into something which you can discuss with others. And very rightly said, we are still not talking of education. After so many years of independence, you'll still find people who can't even read and write. And just imagine what is the world for them. You go to a foreign country where you can't read signs, how do you feel? And think of those students who cannot, or think of those children, or even adults who can't read and write. There are many. Just talk to the person who is working at your place. Is it all right for us to expect from that person that he will own the responsibility for sustainable development? The answer is no. What is happening, whether we talk of loss of biodiversity or climate change, who is suffering? Yes, in Delhi, now we have started suffering, but not so much because we are still putting air purifiers at our houses. It's again the poorest of the poor who is suffering the most. And are we expecting them to change the world? Yes, we can bring awareness. You are talking of rice straw burning. Have we given them any alternative? If you simply put, don't do this, then what do I do? At what price? And then, am I really aware of? You and I are aware of ill effects of whether it is smoke or the pollution level going up. But the person sitting or the farmer, he is not even aware. He'll say, I'm burning it, the smoke is going in the atmosphere, which doesn't belong to me alone. His children are not aware of it. They don't even know what is the level of pollutants. So that is where, again, education becomes extremely important. And children, they have maximum power to change the world. This year, if you look at the total crackers in Delhi, they were not even 5% of what they used to be a decade ago. So, which is a very good sign. Today, you talk to a small child and they'll definitely stop you from using plastic. They'll say it is not sustainable. So they are aware of those terms, but I'm talking of urban children. They are not those who are in the rural parts. So what is it that we should be doing for them? What is it we should be doing? And that is what maybe if someone of you have that answer, how to reach to those communities, tell them this is the best way, and also learn from them. So it is two-way learning because we also have to learn from them. What role is Skill India playing in terms of reaching to the local communities? In fact, we are also discussing that for the Northeast, because what happens is you organize a training program, you are gone. And then they don't know whom to go back. So therefore, should there be colleges of that kind, not colleges, training centers, that any time they can come and get answers to their queries. So maybe my fellow panelists would like to add based on what little discussion we had.
I was just going to say one thing that comes to mind is that I think, Vibha, what you said in terms of awareness, definitely if you are looking at the awareness campaigns, whether it is in the villages or even in the cities, I think we need to really strengthen them. I think, and that has to be an integral part of whatever we do. Whether it's a study mobility tour or it's a high-end research exam, we must include, we've talked about STEM and STEAM. We must include environmental and sustainability as a very, very integral part of whatever program, wherever in the world we are looking at, and specifically at the grassroots level, specifically at the rural level, because I think that's where the importance really comes out stronger.
Thank you. Rishi, you want to make some point? Sure.
And I think the biggest problem in most of our schools in cities and in urban centers is that the exposure to things outside is not done. There are adventure trainings to go for a trek to Dehradun or city sightseeing tour. But do you actually have environmental issues being done? No. Why I'm saying this is because in most of the army cantonments that we do, we have these flora-fauna parks which we put up, where we put up these organic, I mean, here itself we've done it so often in some of the cantonments here. It's there in Delhi cantonments. You go into Rajasthan, you'll see it. I think the practical aspect of education to link environment for the child to be able to translate that book and story which he sees in an audio visual to actually on ground is where the issue is. And I think that's not happening. And that's why the take is not there. And as you said, exactly the same reason I've got my grandkids to go to Kaziranga to see it now. So they understand what it is to be with nature. So I think that's I feel urban centers and education system of ours is not addressing the practical applicability for the child to translate this book and story into pictures, into actual life. And then only will he get that life skill.
Sure, I agree with you. And
I think there has to be a lot of exchange programs is very important. Like if you see communities, bamboo is an integral part of most of the communities, whoever or from wherever it is. So I don't see any architectural college coming in and doing a research on, see, those are all science houses. If you see a missing bamboo house, during the flood, they open the sideways and the boat plies on. So it's a beautiful example because an architect will be in a better position to design those things, and those exposures have to be there. Whatever is there in between us, it has to be spoken well, it has to be admired, and it has to be respected. So even you talk about culture, be it music, like Bhupen Hazarika has sang most of his songs on the nature, on the environment, everything is there, on the river. It's already been there, we just need to pick it up. All the lines are there.
Sure. No, I totally agree with you on that.
Yes, I would like to hear add one more thing here. This is from my experience. Like I said, children can actually, take the message on. And it's very difficult to make an adult unlearn what they had learned and put something new into them. So I would say that the schools from the cities and schools which are even near Kaziranga, say there are many high schools, good schools. So the children can actually interact with even the children from the village or thing and exchange ideas and share. Because when we do workshop with children, I always take my son along because they communicate with the child more, another child more than with me. So if these children who are, I would say, more advantaged in terms of education or whatever, if they take it as a social responsibility, if the school gives some kind of a leniency in, these kind of programs where they are not only into academics or studying, so I think that can add in to one aspect of that,
Vibha, if I just may add one more thing, I think we also need to look at our definition of wealth again, because especially in the Northeast, where general logistics can be an issue, a lot of the kids growing up in rural areas in the Northeast, their only access to what is cool and what they need to strive for as far as a career or as far as wealth goes or as far as bettering their prospects goes is what they see on their mobiles. So they may be seeing some Bollywood film, or they may be seeing some K-pop on their video on their phone, or whatever it is. So the idea of wealth and the idea of what you need to aspire to is slightly skewed. Now, urban kids in cities may have a better idea, not only because they have a better access to education, but that's not going to stop the rural kids wanting to better their lives and therefore come to the cities. So we also have to think of ways of keeping the rural youth in their areas and appreciating their their natural resources, that having that thinking that they are extremely wealthy because they have natural resources as opposed to material stuff, the way we define it today.
All the panelists are talking about school education. The good news is that the new education policy that might come up, it's at the last stage, they have incorporated everything. I have gone through the draft and it's there. It's discussed in this way only. The way he's doing, Rishi Raj is working in the ground and getting these skills or knowledge of traditional knowledge, what you call. But I'm not too sure whether they would be implemented the way they should be. The problem in our country is that in terms of policy, in terms of what should be done, we all know these things. I have heard these kind of things in several other sessions also, at several other places. But the sad part is that we always, discourse get hijacked by frivolous things. For instance, in the education policy, and I'm plugging this for myself also, I did a cover story on this entire policy, going deep into this, and also finding faults and whatever the corrective measures could be done. But nobody responded to the story or nobody asked me about the other details. The main discussion was revolving around whether Hindi would be imposed or not. Whether the point is that it was not even discussed there. The way the discourse has gone, Hindi was not the issue. And I was very impressed with what he is doing and what he is saying. Actually, I was relating back to that policy. I was thinking exactly what you are doing practically. Those things are now in theory with the government. So probably they can learn more how to implement these things without the infrastructure even. Means I'm sure you don't have that government infrastructure, but yet you are doing those things. So only I'm hopeful that they would, this time probably they would implement it better, because our records are very bad. Which government, it's not, it doesn't matter, but that's all I wanted to add.
I'll just like to add to what you said, because one of the other problems has been that we don't have the right set of teachers in many places. No one wants to take the rural posting. So over there, that is what I said in the beginning, that now we are living in a different era, and therefore the lectures can be recorded. And UGC already has done that. I was involved with their EPG Pathshala. So courses on the cutting edge subjects were taken by best of the teachers and then given to them. So I hope that will also become true for schools. Last question, because we are running out of time.
Yes, let me introduce myself. I am Raj Basu, and I work with rural communities. All this time we have been mostly talking about urban school and how best we can make out of urban school. And as he just said, we did not talk about the kind of school that Rishi has been talking about. That how do we mainstream these schools? How do we say that we are going to make business models out of rural schools? How do we say that, you know, the children in our cities, now that they have wealth, economically, they do not have the natural wealth. How they can have education, go back to the villages and have that kind of education? We are not talking about it. So I think it is more important in this forum, because most of us belong to the Northeast and our strength is standing on nature. How do we create better rural schools where urban children and urban parents would also would love to send their children to? Because we have already had big models like the Vishwa Bharati when it was started by Kavi Guru Rabindranath Tagore. It was even the Prime Minister in those days wanted his daughter to go to that university. So the models are there. It is not that it is not there, that only that we have forgotten the entire thing in the process. So from this forum, let us see how we can create the schools that Rishi has been talking about, that you have been talking about, more in the Northeast, so that the rest of the country comes and studies over here.
I totally agree. In fact, that's the message we all have to take back home. Thank you so much for your comment. Thanks to the fellow panelists and to all the audience. Thank you so much for your attention.